Hello, my name is Kevin Lloyd. I'm one of Mark's volunteers. In this discussion, Mark Cherrington and I talk about what he's been up to this past month. We'll talk about his fundraiser gala that was held on May 2nd. We'll also address various social issues faced by those he helps, including the difficulties and frustrations faced by those needing child welfare and income support services. Yeah. Recounts multiple cases, such as an Indigenous man who lost his truck. It was impounded when he was arrested while sleeping in his truck for old warrants. We'll go into more detail about that, as well as Mark's efforts to get his truck back. We'll also talk about a mother facing intrusive treatment by child welfare. We discuss the chronic inefficiencies and bureaucratic barriers faced by those within the systems, and the challenges of emergency social services. We end the podcast by addressing the critical and importance of donations that Mark desperately needs to support the vulnerable people that he helps. These include financial support, essential items, and unlocked, functional, used cell phones. Without further ado, let's go to that conversation. Hello, Mark. Good to see you.
Hello, Kevin. Likewise.
Episode 2.
I've changed my background a bit.
Yeah, you have. It's
I'm
gorgeous.
I'm not sitting on the couch drinking a beer this time.
Yeah,
No, I wasn't last time.
not slouched in the recliner. You're comfortable. It was okay.
Yeah,
You're a busy guy.
yeah,
You deserve to relax. But I was actually going to ask you to sit up if you were still there, and it looks better on camera, obviously, and I'm sure it's a little more comfortable and better looking. Dare I say?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Thank
exactly.
you.
But it's a gorgeous fireplace to have there. As I said before we started recording, love the pictures, love the painting.
Yeah, I got my son's Lego in the back when he was a little boy.
Ah,
See the little row of Lego heads. But anyways, yeah,
no, that's awesome. No, that's
yeah,
perfectly fine. It
yeah.
helps us to get to know you a little bit, Mark.
Most people have books, or they have big, huge family albums, or they have posters of like free this country or end
Sure,
apartheid here.
sure.
I just have little Lego guys from my son. So that's my.
That and a gorgeous fireplace, lovely home, love pictures, painting. That's a really good Zoom background.
Okay, I'll keep this.
Let let
I'll keep
let
this in.
let's keep this one going. Absolutely. But episode 2, we made it.
Yes. Yes, it's been a bit of a delay because I had my fundraiser and been
Yes,
busy like all heck, and just coincidentally the times that we were supposed to meet,
yes,
it was just I was just involved in emergencies that were safety issues, so I had to focus on that, and
yeah,
that has to take priority. So,
yes.
but I'm glad to be sitting here with you, Kevin, and I
Fully
got one
agreed.
of my cats here.
Awesome, awesome. Maybe you'll make an appearance. Who knows? Can you tilt your camera down just a little bit? All right, perfect. Thank you. Get you centered.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the fundraiser. Tell us all about it. That's exciting.
Okay. Part of the sustainability process and highlighting the work that the coalition and I do involves an opportunity to meet face to face, and we thought no better way than a gala. So a lot of really great volunteers came together with myself and Sam Mason from the coalition, and we planned this beast at the River Cree. And it was a bit nervous because it was a lot of money up front, um, and that made me nervous. So we put pressure on to have to sell tickets. And I was worried that it would be like one of those Holiday Inn bands that you see playing at the Holiday Inn. There were three people sitting in a band. But I was happy to say as the days counted by and we got closer to the date of the event, our ticket sales really picked up. And by the day of the gala, we were oversubscribed. So we were sold out. And that was a big help. I met some great people. I met some people that came from my Twitter crowd, including people that travel all the way, let's say, from Grand Prairie. And we had a lot of judges or justices, as they're now called. And we had a lot of lawyers, criminal lawyers, human rights lawyers. And we had a band that was made up of judges called Y and F and Y, which means Family and Youth Court. That's why the name is F and Y. And it was a good time by all. And I was really nervous. until right after my speech and all the work was done, and I could sit down with my wife, and my parents came and start socializing and just relaxing, and it was really, really good time. And um,
That's wonderful that some
we're
people came
successful.
from.
Yeah, and we had some great auction items. We had some great paintings. We had a Connor McDavid Oilers jersey. We had a Scotch tasting
Scotch
item.
tasting. There's
Yeah.
some drinking involved. Yeah.
So we made a bit of money, and that really helps the sustainability issues and
Okay.
moves us forward.
Can you give us a sense of how much was raised?
Uh, we haven't finished the counting now, but I think it's good. I don't want to give numbers, specifically numbers. It puts us in a good position to help those that I'm trying to help, like with food vouchers and clothing and things like that. Yeah, it was successful. The overhead costs were really high, but once we met that, we were all in the black.
Mhm.
And so we just made money really on the auction items.
Oh,
And
wonderful.
yeah.
And that's fantastic that one of the auction items sounds like a few things were donated for that and made some money.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
excellent.
the signed Connor McDavid jersey went for 3,100.
Wow. Doesn't
Yeah.
surprise me.
Yeah. So it was good.
That
Yeah.
that 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 is fantastic. And that I'm thrilled about too, of course, is members of the your social media, the audience, the people that read what you're posting there. You had some of those great people attend as well. So it's good to have those kind of the some of the people who follow you on social media who care enough to attend the event, maybe donate to potentially participate in the auction. And then you have, as you pointed out, the as well, justices, some defense firms to have that kind of participation. That is truly fantastic.
Yeah. And it was a situation where I had an opportunity as well to speak to people about what we do,
Yes.
to judges and crown prosecutors as well as defense counsel. And so it was a great opportunity to highlight and offer our services to the courts in the hopes of helping more families and more people at risk. And that's the whole goal. That's what we created, is to help people. It's not to shy away from any of it.
Mhm.
It's to take on the battles. And as I said in my speech, human rights is not a popular subject right now. The Coalition for Justice and Human Rights, we got our fair number of trolls and just slaggers who really don't appreciate or have a kind heart, in my opinion.
Mhm.
But human rights is so critical in everything we do. And but for the grace of God, if some of these people, if they lost everything or they were accused of something and they were arrested and put in jail and they had nobody to turn to, that's who we are. That's what we're here for. Families that get their children apprehended, people that can't access healthcare, people that are getting isolated in the school system. So if a child is behaviors issues are deemed not normal, they get isolated into a B&D class, behavior and disorder class, or if they're too bad, they get pushed into homeschooling. So there's all these systems that crush people. And if you're ignorant of the systems, it's almost like swimming in a shark tank. So those are the battles that we take on daily. And it's been really busy for me in all those systems.
Yeah.
For a lot of people.
Yes.
I know that you had asked me how many people I worked with, and I'll post this, but I worked with 118 people last month in the month of April. And 9 of them were newborns. And 3 of them were over their 80s. One was 97. These are people, newborns, people that are 97. These are people that should not be needing our help for anything.
Mm.
But they do. And in particular, I know that I was dealing with one case that made me very angry, really. It was a mom. She's in her early 30s. And I've worked with her since she was 12, when she discovered she discovered the body of her mother at 12. And she went into care for the rest of her child life, so from 12 to 18. And she was sexually exploited as a child, and she cooperated with the police and went to the police, and she put her pimp in jail for 7 years.
Mm.
So she was a brave mom and a good mom. or is. And this is just my personal belief, but because she was involved in the system and her family's been involved in the system, the child welfare system through generations, they hover over like hawks with these sharp vision, keeping an eye on everything that a family does. And it seems like Section 8 of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, the right to privacy, doesn't really apply to families like this mom. And I'll just call her Dorothy. That's not her real name. So it doesn't really apply to families like Dorothy's. And she has 5 children, including a newborn. And one of the children, we believe, was sexually abused. And that child's 8 and is acting inappropriately, so would be touching sexually towards all the other children except the newborn, including touching sexually at the mother. Mother reached out for help. And of course, child welfare just went, whoa. And somewhere in this process of child welfare getting involved, and you think you'd hear everything after 35 years of the work that I've done, you think you'd hear it all. But child welfare came up with this fucking wacky program, this idea that they were going to play house. That's what I call it, play house, where they weren't going to observe the family in the organic environment, their house. They were going to observe the family in an artificial environment. So they decided a hotel room. We'll put 5 children and a mother and a staff of their connected with child welfare into this hotel room. Of course, what I think happened is that child welfare phoned and asked for the cheapest hotel room they could get, and that's what they got. And they cabbed the family over to this small, grungy hotel room with 1 bed and a table and a chair in a dark corner where the staff would observe them. And the staff, and Dorothy requested a female staff because, let's say, what are the triggers? I've been sexually exploited as a child, and I'm in a hotel room. Hotel rooms are triggers for a lot of these people. And of course, child welfare in their wisdom ignore that and send a male staff. And this man sits in a dark corner, that's the way it was described to me, and doesn't say a word, doesn't interact. He has no communication skills. He doesn't know how to articulate. He doesn't know how to interact and de-escalate or provide some comfort or some assurances. He just sits in this dark corner and observes. And so, of course, Dorothy is complaining, and they offer, when the kids are all settling in, and they say, hey, we found another hotel room or an apartment, I think it was, with 2 beds. And by that time, it was 8:30, 9 o'clock. It was just too late. What they should have done is just cab the family home and reassessed the disaster they made. But they continued this experiment where this one man sits in a corner and watches a mom and 5 children, including a newborn, interact for 12 hours. And it's a frickin' safety issue because you don't put a baby in a bed with 4 other people. Child welfare apparently does this.
Yeah, but the possibility for smothering her child is very real.
Yeah. And Dorothy calls me just in tears, and she's explaining all this. I'm going, what the So anyways, it ends up that mom and 3 of the children, including the newborn, sleep on the bed. And one of the children sleeps on a coffee table, a coffee table.
Yeah.
Not a fold out, but on the coffee table.
Well, what else is there? It's a motel.
And the other and the oldest child, which I believe is the 8-year-old, the oldest, sleeps on a chair that I'm sitting on, like just a fold out chair. What is child welfare doing? What are they trying to think of? What is it? What outcome are they looking for? What can you gain? What can you glean from all that sort of wild shit that they just did that night? So anyways, we're not letting this go. I'm meeting with Dorothy hopefully tomorrow, and we're going to write a formal letter of complaint to the minister and to the Children's Advocate's Office. But I know what this comes from. This is child welfare can't retain their staff. This is what I'm seeing. They can't retain their staff. They go through staff like a goose with diarrhea. And they've downloaded all their responsibilities and all their funding and all their a lot of their tasks of what they used to do to these nonprofit agencies called CDSs, Community Delivery Systems, or something, some sort of stupid acronym. And it's where these nonprofits and for-profit companies are involved in this, which
Lovely.
do all this work for children's services, like arrange a hotel room. So you put in this other level of administration, you put in all this level of bureaucracy. So it goes bureaucracy and then services.
Yeah.
And in my opinion, and I hope the minister sees this little snippet, it's a disaster. It's an absolute disaster. And what they should have done was they should make the working conditions better for the child welfare workers. They should put some standards in. So maybe every child welfare worker is an RSW, registered social worker. And they should have just hired youth workers to work within the unit specifically to do that, some of that interaction and take some of that load off. But they keep, I don't know, they invite these bureaucrats to a table and they plan these stupid ideas like the CDS model.
Yeah.
Or in Dorothy's case, a hotel room with one bed and 6 people sleeping in it. Like it's just, anyways, you can see that I'm angry about that one. And like, why do we have these frustrations? Why do we have these battles? And of course, when you catch child welfare like this, their new way of dealing with things is ghosting people. They just ghost. You write a letter, you make a phone call, you leave, they all ghost you.
So they ignore you.
Yeah, they ignore me. Or they ignore, no, they not only ignore me, they ignore Dorothy.
Yeah, well, yeah.
So it's a broken system.
Yeah, and I just wanted to speak to something just very quickly in that. To clarify, I suppose is the word I want to use. The impression I'm getting from you is this is not an isolated thing. This isn't one really bad horror story about one particular family. You're saying this kind of thing is happening all the time, where things are being approached this way and handled this way by child welfare. It's so it can't. I'm trying not to give the government an out where they're saying this is isolated. It was a one-time thing. We'll do better.
So there's a pattern a pattern of services that aren't best practices. This is an extreme example. And child welfare does a lot of good. It does a lot of good. Okay. And the people that get into the field want to help people, but the system doesn't appreciate that they're hiring good people and let good people make good decisions. And it's so they have this hierarchical thing. And that's because
it's one thing to, maybe it's a bad analogy, but I get my iced coffees at McDonald's. That's one of my guilty pleasures. They have high turnaround, but it's one thing for them to have high turnaround with what kind of work that they're doing. It's another when you're talking about situations like you're describing of dealing with families and those who've been sexually exploited and dealing with these things, and you have the high turnaround, and the way that's being handled is inexcusable. I can't even come up with a strong enough word. Situations like you're describing of families being put into a hotel room for God knows what reason and being
and there's also a staff shortage associated with this. Always. So we have cases where at least I've reported that are clear to me, having worked within the child welfare system, having worked within the healthcare system, having worked within the justice system, having worked in these systems, when I see a child in need of protection and it's clear and I report it to child welfare or I report with the family, that's usually what it takes weeks before someone reaches out to them. Weeks. Yeah. And the staff have said to me, it's because there's a staff shortage. So ultimately, there's one person responsible, and that's the minister.
So you say staff, yes. You say staff shortage, and I fully believe you. But I think for the times that I've been on income support, as an example, in my own life, I've gotten the real sense of they're just chronically under-resourced. They're not well-funded. They're not given the tools they need, the resources they need to provide the services that they're mandated. I'm pretty sure they're mandated to provide to people. So I suspect that the same is true for child welfare to a large extent, because there was one thing, you talk about child services as a whole and how broken that system is truly, but you did say in your tweet threads over this past week here, I think, that there was one particular supervisor that you managed to get a hold of, and you told them how much they fucked things up, and they hung up on you. So
Yeah.
I'm not sure what that tells me. If it was just
Yeah.
one incompetent supervisor, or
No, no, I don't want to say she's incompetent. I would say
okay,
that,
okay,
and the way I described it to it is that there was a lot of bad decisions.
yeah,
And
okay,
because I'm not in the room and I just see the outcome. And so I don't, I've worked with this supervisor before and
okay,
she's been okay.
okay.
And I've been hung up lots of times by child welfare and income support. And I even
Right.
had the cops hang up on me once. But I think she really saw the pressure because this issue isn't going away. Actually, I'm supposed to call back the APTN, the Aboriginal Public Television Station, and they want to do they've done an interview in regards to this incident. So I think the supervisor just felt stressed out. And just when I mentioned, I said, this wasn't a good decision. Or I said, this one's really messed up, isn't it? I
Yeah.
went, bye, click. And I probably would have done the same thing too. But I'll tell you where people hang up on you, and they, I think, deliberately as a barrier. And this is, let's go to another system and
Okay.
another level.
Right.
It's emergency social services. I challenge anybody to three-way call with somebody in a crisis. So you've got a mom on with two babies, and she phones you because you're the only support person. And she's angry and she's upset because she tried calling emergency social services and they minimized it. They maybe didn't believe her. She said something like the word booger or something like or some sort of swear word, and they click, hang up. And they're very quick to hang up. And I've been hung up by emergency social services loads of times, and I find them very rude. I find them authoritative. I find them very patronizing. I find them undertrained and not appreciating some of the issues, including legislation under the Child, Family and Youth Enhancement Act, which, or is it child? Yeah, the Child, Youth and Family Enhancement Act, which is anybody that's aware of a child in danger has an obligation to report that. And to, if you're in a position to fix that, such as income support, they have an obligation to get that child out of danger.
So
so let's go back to this
yep.
mother with two children.
Yeah.
She phones, she gets hung up on, and she might be upset, she might be escalating.
I was going to say,
and they're just, this just compounds the situation. They don't have any, at least for my dealings with emergency income support, they don't have any experience in de-escalating crises. They ask cold, hard questions that are closed questions, yes or no. Do you have a family? And they don't let you explain, yeah, but they're abusive or they're addiction or there's 17 of them in a one bedroom. They don't let you explain that, at least in what I call. So do you have a family? Yeah, you need to go there. I don't want to. Why? Because they're addiction to something. This is something you can live with for a couple of days. So there's something like that. They're just very direct and cold, and they ask closed questions, and it becomes quite a very significant barrier for people in a crisis.
So the circumstances,
children in basic,
the circumstances in which these people, and very realistic circumstances, it sounds like income support in particular. To your point,
emergency social
emergency
services.
income support, where they have their criteria that qualifies individuals to potentially get income support, emergency income support, but also income support. I've been there.
Yeah, but so let's back a bit. Yep. So when you call emergency social services, it's usually for a hotel room or food or emergency ride, something of that nature. They're not there to take an application or start the process of obtaining income support.
Okay.
They're there for Albertans who have no means at that time and no resources at that time to stay safe or have their basic human rights covered, access to shelter, things like that. They're really, and when you're dealing with children, that trumps everything. That becomes the paramount issue is the child. Let's say mom says, I smoked all my money on crack. How is it that 8-month-old baby's responsibility? you have to go over that issue and you have to
Mm.
make sure that you're focused on protecting the baby. But if a mom says, I blew this money, or I'm addicted or something, or they have mental health issues, they don't ignore that, which they're supposed to.
Mm.
This is emergency social services, and try to make that child and that mom safe. They start questioning about her lifestyle or her choices. They're not dealing specifically with the emergency of getting the mom into a hotel room. And usually we're talking hotel rooms because, as I tell every mother, before they call emergency social services, they should call Lorena House, they should call Win House, they should call Safe Place, they should call the Salvation Army, and see if all the shelters within the city are full. And they always are, because there's such a shortage of shelters. And then once they get the no room, it's like little town of Bethlehem during census. And mothers are literally thinking, do I put my baby in a manger on the street, or what do I do? Then when they call, emergency social services should react immediately to that situation. But in my experiences, they don't. They become patronizing, they become condescending, they're very cold, their questions are closed, and they don't have the skill set to de-escalate and provide some sort of comfort, or just thinking of the word, provide some comfort or some assurances that that family is going to be safe.
Why is this
And
happening?
that's, I think, a lot of, again, this is just me.
Okay.
We have gone completely online. We've gone completely to a phone system. There's no continuum of care. We look at things geographically. We don't look at things culturally. We don't, and you're dealing with people that are, at least in my personal opinion, glorified telemarketers. They're glorified telemarketers in the sense that they're just sit on a phone and a computer screen and input data, and they're asking these questions, and then they assess based on just that phone call. And if the family is going through crises and they swear or they aren't easy to get along with, I believe that the favorite button that they have on their desk is the hang up button.
Right.
And so you hang up on a family with the children. That to me is illegal. I'm not a lawyer.
Certainly wrong.
And I'm not a police officer, but I think they're breaching the legislation. And that's what I... Okay. So then they call me, and then we have this haggled phone call back with them, and then and then they might offer a shelter down in Bonnyville or Cold Lake, or something in Red Deer. And these shelters, because they invested all these money in rural shelters, which is good, but they're all half empty. But you can't take a family unit that has, maybe the mom has chronic illnesses and has appointments set up, or maybe the baby has a pediatrician appointment, or a job interview, or even like a probation officer appointment, something like that, where they can't just move, where their support systems are still in the city. You just can't tear up this family and move it. And the motel becomes the best option with a kitchenette or something for 3 or 4 days. That's what we're usually talking about. And
except in situations where they should be staying home. Like you said, like why were they put in why was that family put into the motel room? Why weren't...
Well, there are two different total scenarios. When families call emergency social services, they usually call because they're fleeing domestic violence, where they don't have a home. This family had a home, but the behavior of one of the children was very worrisome and bothersome, and so they played family and moved that family into a hotel room.
Again,
but they're two different systems. You've got the adult income support system and child welfare system.
I'm just confused as to why they're put in the motel room instead of staying home when they had a home to stay in, and it worsened the situation.
Exactly. They're putting families that don't need hotel rooms into hotel rooms, and they're putting families that need hotel rooms onto the streets because there is no hotel rooms.
And it sounds like you're definitely following up with this family, with this situation, and I'm not sure what that looks like, but hopefully that'll gain some results, if not awareness.
Cyril Turton is the Minister of Children's Services, and I've met with him, and he seems like a very...
You've talked about him before,
very nice man who's very focused, but I think he's being fed bullshit and he's taking that bullshit at face value. And he's missing a lot of what's really going on, the undercurrents. So he's not seeing the whole situation. And then the Minister for Income Support, Community Family Services is good old Jason Nixon, who to me seems the coldest, angriest minister that I've ever seen. And I don't think that he would give two hoots about some of these families or some of these children. That's just my opinion. Now, I know he's suffered and went through a lot with one of his children, and I'm glad that worked out well for him. But I don't think he shows that same empathy to other families and other children. And that rubs down, it goes top down. And that's what I'm seeing on the front lines, because I think again, this is all a hypothesis based on what I see and dealing with income support daily. Is I'm seeing that I think they're really trying to cut services and cut budgets.
Yeah. And I think there's absolutely some truth, and you've spoken to it before, of where ministers, politicians, those in power, they're not, I want to say in the trenches enough, but they're not exposed enough to the realities of what's happening whenever they go out into the communities, to different facilities, different whatever situations. It's very, how do I say this? The people that they're surrounded with in those situations, it's a very specific story being told to them, who's meeting them, who they're talking to. It's not the reality of what's really going on, and they're acting on what they're being told, whereas they're not Mark Cherrington or someone else in a similar position where they're living this stuff day in, day out, and they see the cold, hard, brutal truth at times of what's really going on. So but that's ignorance. They could better inform themselves and take themselves out of their ivory towers, out of their offices, surrounded by yes men in a lot of cases, and really get a much better sense of what's really going on directly with the people, but the organizations that are trying to help these people. So a lot could be done. I don't see this government doing much going forward. That's just my opinion. I think it'll be hopefully the NDP in 2027 that moves us closer to it more in a more positive direction. But I don't want to get
yeah. I'm not in this situation. I've worked with EP ministers that were useless as well. I'm not. Maybe this government, and they have a mandate, and we have to appreciate that. But I find
that.
Yeah. But I find this particular government really focused on an ideology.
Yes.
As opposed to being pragmatic.
Yes.
And that's, again, all of this is just my opinion. And I'm reminding everybody that what I do is because I choose to do it.
Okay.
But when you're dealing with child welfare workers, and what you're dealing with income support workers, and when you're dealing with healthcare providers, they have an obligation to help.
You think
they don't have a choice.
Yeah, what they're doing is on paper. It's not necessarily in practice. They're downloading to charities and other companies, and they're pulling away from what used to be more of their responsibilities, and therefore I think that they're less involved.
We've had lots of success.
Sure.
And again, I'm not saying that success was based on the system. The success was based on processes that me and this mom. So this is the second case I wanted to talk about. So this mom, she was in a marriage with a partner who, I'll say this, she was involved in a marriage with a partner who was charged with sexual offenses towards the siblings. And I think the charges were stayed or dismissed. So they didn't meet the criminal, obviously, to make the criminal bar of being culpable, but there's still a strong indication that something wasn't right. And this family, described to me by the mom, had to flee because of the abuse. Mm-hmm. And this mom came to me when child welfare was already intrusively involved. And they just had apprehended this mom's children for emotional trauma. That was the reasons for the apprehensions from the mom. And the same they apprehended from both, because both parents were guardians. And I want to tell people that when a child is apprehended, or there's interim custody or interim care granted to child welfare, Parents don't lose their guardianship. They still have their rights as a guardian, including being informed and having a say in the medical choices, having being informed and having a say about living arrangements, about visits, about associations, also cultural issues, all sorts of issues. So parents that have children involved in the child welfare system, unless the child is PGO or even TGO, don't lose their guardianship.
PGO?
And they TGO, so TGO is temporary guardianship. So child welfare can take control of a child's well-being for up to 2 years, which is called a TGO, temporary guardianship order, or PGO, permanent guardianship order. But getting to that, there's all sorts of, there's takes months and months to get to a trial. So there could, child welfare could have interim guardianship, but that doesn't mean the parents lose their guardianship in most cases when they're involved with child welfare. So to keep it simple, parents in most cases don't lose their rights as a parent in regards to their children. But what I see in practice is the opposite. So this family, and I just can comment really on the mom side after, we were in a battle with child welfare because they were of the opinion that mom was an unfit parent, that she was giving emotional trauma and damage to these 3 children. And this had caused child welfare to act very in the sense where they wouldn't allow mom at first to have any visits, and then all the visits now are supervised. And there was a lot of issues. Within the Child Welfare Act, there's a process called administrative reviews. And if you're the legal guardian of a child, or the child themselves can do an admin review, which is you can challenge any decision the director makes. In the first review, Mom and I challenged that we wanted a different worker, that we were concerned that the father was allowed to go swimming with these children in a pool. There's lots of underwater. They're supervised, but the worker was up in the gallery and things can happen. And the third thing was just to expand the visits between mom and the children. And we were successful on the first review. They varied this decision, which meant child welfare, the original workers had to provide more collaboration. They had to provide more insight. They had to do what's called a trajectory path and give mom something to work on. So we won the first one, and then we did a second one, and we won that one, and then we did a third one, and we won the third one. So each time in this family situation, when the mom is fighting for more rights and more responsibilities and thinks child welfare has acted over intrusively, when we've done these admin reviews, the panel has agreed with us on some of the points. They varied all 2 of them, and we won on the third one completely. And the third one was so that the oldest daughter could return home with mom, and that's happened. So now what we do is, in this case, in this file, is every time we disagree with child welfare, we don't even argue with them, is we do another admin review. And now the managers reached out to us, and we're having a meeting so we can find some common ground and actually start listening, child welfare actually start listening to mom and compromising on some of their policies and some of their decisions that are really intrusive on this family. But yeah, so there's positive battles. Every battle's a positive in my mind. The outcomes may not always be what you want. Fighting for somebody that has no shelter, no food, they've had their children taken away. Those are very dirty in the trench, hand-to-hand combat sort of battles. And it gets sloppy and it gets messy. And Lord knows I've made lots of mistakes myself as well. But I'm always one to say, hey, listen, I made the mistake. I'm sorry. But I find the system can't acknowledge a mistake. And again, what I said earlier is they end up ghosting you or ignoring you. So yeah, just an interesting couple of weeks.
I don't say middleman, but this who that communicates with whatever department it happens to be with child welfare. It makes me wish that, I guess the system worked differently for one, but where of course someone's going to be distraught and angry, or might throw an F-bomb once in a while or what have you because of their incredibly stressful situation. So to have someone in between who can communicate things in such a way to whatever department it is to get these people the assistance that they need, but they got to handle that better, or have somebody in more cases in between to help referee the situation.
Yeah, exactly.
There's another case, one of your, I think it was yesterday, memory serves, you had quite a popular tweet regarding an indigenous man who was sleeping in his truck because he was homeless, and the police investigated, whatever that means.
Yeah, yeah.
He ended up having old warrants. He was remanded into custody. His truck was impounded, and now he's on the streets, having pawned his work tools, boots for food, and housing for 2 nights. But if his truck had just been left alone, he may have had a fighting chance. There was quite a bit of reaction to that post. I'm curious if you have any further insights into
Yeah,
that.
so again, this man, his grandmother, and he's an elderly man himself.
Hmm.
His grandmother passed away, and of course, they had to evacuate. They had to leave the house. I don't know what for reasons, but they couldn't stay because it was grandmother's house, and she'd passed, and I think they couldn't remain there. That's so he has his truck and his work tools. The truck's insured. The truck is registered. He has a valid driver's license. He drives to Edmonton and he pulls over and he's clean and sober,
Hmm.
and he falls asleep. And somehow that's reported and investigated, and the man has warrants. And I get that. Okay. There's all this generational trauma, there's issues. And yeah, so I think it was just could have been a pay and stay fine or something. So I met him in custody. And when he told me this, he says, he was upset that they towed his truck. And he says, why would they tow my truck if it's registered and insured and I'm not impaired? Why would they tow my truck? And I think that decision to tow his truck was cruel and unusual. Now, the police might have a very good reason, including that you're technically not supposed to keep your car parked on the same spot for more than 72 hours. I challenge the police to go to the Riverbend or Old Glenora or one of those nicer neighborhoods and start tagging people that have been parked their Jags or their Porsche in the front street for more than 3 days. It's like spitting on the sidewalk, okay? But in this case, they decide to tow it. And his truck was his barrier. His truck was his protective factor in his life. His truck stabilized him. His truck provided him opportunity. His truck provided him employment. And by putting him in jail and impounding his truck, he lost all that because the impound fees and the towing fees are so much. So he ends up owing $1,600 to get his truck. And of course, he doesn't have that kind of money. So his truck will sit there for a certain amount of days, and then after some time, it'll get auctioned off.
Okay.
And this barrier, this protective factor, has destroyed all the stability in his life, and he's at risk of a lot of things. He's at risk of more interactions with the healthcare system because he's on the streets, homeless, infections, whatever, pick your poison. He's under more stressors. And so the issues of harmful substance uses can't be ignored. There's the issue that he has no access to employment because he was a construction worker, and you need a truck to go on sites. You just can't take the bus to the north side of Edmonton where they're framing houses because there's no buses and no bus routes. The issues of employment is taken away from him, his livelihood. And I think society would have been better off if they had just left his truck.
Yeah.
So what I ended up doing was I ended up getting him involved with the Salvation Army Stabilization Program, where he would have a safe place to stay and work from and get organized and have some advocacy within the staff at the Salvation Army Stabilization Program, which, by the way, is an excellent program.
Mm-hmm.
And I put it on Twitter that just explaining his thing, and people really felt for this man. And so I got a donation from somebody for $1,600
really
to pay for this man's truck. So now the challenge is I'm trying to get a hold of him saying, hey, we can get your truck out. But of course, he's on the street and he can't buy minutes or anything like that. So I'm trying to track him down to let him know that we can get his truck back.
Yeah.
And all of that is because of the donors on Twitter. They're amazing donors and an amazing community. And I'm very confident we'll get his truck man back and get this man out of this nightmare fairly quickly.
His warrants are taken care of now?
Oh yeah, I don't, and this is the other thing I want to bring up is when I go meet someone, I'm not there to tear their chest open and look inside their heart and see what they've done and what they haven't done.
Hmm.
So I didn't even ask the man what he was in there for. I mean, what relevance is it for me to know what he was in there for? And he didn't bring it up.
Okay.
And he spoke to bail for the first time and was released. So
Okay.
I'm assuming it's not anything
Hmm.
life threatening or extremely dangerous in any way.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Was it the reason why, like, when they, I'm just trying to go through the situation in my head. Obviously, I don't have judgment toward this man. I'm just trying to understand. And I saw a few comments to this effect as well of why did I mean, you said you didn't ask him, so I guess maybe we'll never know. But I'm curious why the man didn't address his warrants or what have you. If because he was remanded into custody, I'm assuming because of the warrants, his truck was impounded because of the warrants. So
yeah.
it's hard for me not to say why didn't he see that coming,
Yeah,
thing,
I
and
exactly. And
to
I'm
avoid
not,
being, yeah,
yeah, but I'm saying that because he went into custody, you don't lose all your rights to your property. And
lost access to it because he didn't have 16.
yeah, they should have left his vehicle
Okay.
where it was.
Okay. So they could have
And
so they could have remanded him into custody without impounding the vehicle. Okay.
exactly.
Okay. Okay.
Even give them 72 hours and then tag it to toward him 70, give him 72 hours. I don't understand why.
Okay. So he was,
And there might
yeah,
be a very valid reason,
yeah.
but I don't think so. I really don't. And even if it was in, let's say, a tow zone or something,
Hmm.
listening to him and explaining how important his truck is, if the police had used their discretion and
Yeah.
they could have made some better choices and really helped this person as opposed to hindering them. And yeah, he obviously must have made some bad choices or something because he didn't take care of his warrants.
Yeah.
And but
Okay.
going
Well,
forward from that, I don't think punishment should include him losing his livelihood in that, especially when he's not breaking the law at that time with his truck.
okay. Yeah. Yeah.
I don't think it's against the law to sleep in your truck
No,
when you're sober and the engine off.
well, they,
I
yeah,
just
yeah. Yeah. I don't think the officer, whoever arrested him because his truck was there. I think it was more had to do with the warrants, as you say. But it sounds like the
oh
warrants
yeah,
have been taken care of, and then that shouldn't be a reoccurrence for that kind of situation to happen to him in the future, hopefully.
yeah. Now, just one caveat: my
Yeah.
source of information is always from my clients
Yes.
and their perception,
Yes.
and everything mostly I do. This is what I'm seeing.
Hmm.
This is what I'm hearing. If the police have a different reason, or child welfare has a different explanation, or income support have a different explanation, they should mention it. They can talk general. They
Okay.
don't have to get specifics,
Yeah.
but
So
they don't. They
yeah.
do.
So how did you get involved in this case with this man?
Uh,
I'm curious.
so there's a really good law firm that's really focused on social issues as well as being kick-ass defense lawyers, and that's King's Defense. And this client was with their firm.
Okay. And they reached out to you and said you can hopefully you can help this
Yeah,
guy. Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. That's how I found out about him.
And
So I went to see him, and
okay, and you can help them navigate the all that, and of course put a story out there and got them some help.
yeah. So
Perfect.
I'm hoping you'll call me today, or
I don't want to take up too much more of your time, but I did want to. My goal actually, I love these conversations and people really respond to the stories that you tell, obviously. So, but I really wanted, if we have a few minutes, can you talk about donations? And because you said we could dedicate a whole podcast to the cell phones alone. So I'm curious if you can speak to donations a little bit more. And
so my funding now with the Coalition for Justice and Human Rights is completely reliant on donations. We don't get $1 from the government, and sustainable funding is so critical to budget, to plan, to fight. And sometimes we have to get a lawyer for a family sometimes, but more often or not, I have to top up the rent money. I have to give somebody. Today I gave away $125. I gave $25 for an elderly transgender woman
mhm.
who was really suffering, and I gave $100 to a man who had just been released from prison onto the street with one bus ticket and no clothing. Like he had clothing, but I mean, it was just terrible clothing. So today I gave away $125, and every dollar of that comes from people that donate. So it's critical for me to do what I do
And I hope the fundraiser
is to have,
has stabilized that a little bit going forward in addition
yeah,
to
yeah.
what's coming
But
in
again,
monthly.
it's like a castle getting worn away by the ocean. The ocean is continuous.
Yes.
Keeps bashing against the sand walls, and it keeps collapsing. So this funding has to always be sustainable.
Yeah.
And a lot of agencies, they spend a lot of money on promotion.
Mm-hmm.
Some agencies, like 40 or 30 or 40 cents of the dollar goes to promotion. Another 30 or 40 cents goes to wages.
Mm-hmm.
Another 10 cents goes to administration costs and things like that, and infrastructure. I'm in a donated office. I don't pay the heating bill. I don't have to worry about the electricity bill. I don't have to worry about my internet promotion.
Can you speak to
That's it.
some of the donations, maybe outside of money, that you've received that have benefited people recently or lately?
Yeah, cell phones. And I've been delinquent. I have to go get a cell phone from a great lady, but I haven't had any time to get one. Cell phones, Chromebooks, laptops, feminine hygiene products, those sorts of things are always in demand. Bus tickets are always in demand.
How
Those
many
are the big items.
how many cell phones and Chromebooks do you have on hand now?
None,
None.
none. Yeah, I have to go get one. I'll get it tomorrow. But yeah,
Okay. So unlocked, hopefully, or you have, I don't imagine you just give.
yeah, it's very frustrating giving a phone, an iPhone, to somebody and it's password protected. Why did you give me that? I don't have the IT experience to break in. I'm not James Bond.
Okay, so
So
when you receive a device like that, then say it's an iPhone and it's not wiped, it's has the passcode on it, you can't use it?
yeah, it's useless.
Okay.
It's useless.
That
Yeah, it needs a hard clean. So
okay.
it's as soon as you turn it on, you go through all the prompts of starting a new, what language, English, what country, can that whole process.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
So what I'll do is my end for my own business, but also for your benefit, I'll put together or maybe I can find a great article that already exists that we can share in terms of how to properly wipe the iPhone, how to factory reset it, to get rid of that passcode, to get rid of the data that's on it, so that when you receive it, you can give it to somebody. It's not
My
useless.
understanding is in this a theft protection that if you don't know the password, you're never going to be able to reset that phone.
iPhone, I believe that's correct. So
Yeah.
when somebody
Yeah.
is preparing to get a new phone, what have you, they don't need to do a trade-in. Then they have that old phone, and then they can put in their code, do the reset on their end before they send it off to you. I believe that's how you
Yeah.
have to do it with iPhone. Android a little more flexible depending on the model. There are ways to get around that, but it's honestly better to just put in your code, facial, whatever it is, facial recognition, however you unlock the device, and do the factory reset, wipe the device, have it be good to go, so that you can welcome screen the whole bit, like the first time it's been turned on, except for maybe some whatever wear and tear happens to be physically to the device. Then you receive it, and then you can give it to people. So I think that's critical. I hope.
And I think phones after 2017 are all unlocked now.
After
Like
2017.
provide teen, I think there's a law that they passed where cell phone providers have to make their phones unlockable.
Mm,
So you're not tethered to the same provider.
okay, I'll check on that. But yeah, I know from iPhone, they make it they don't make it easy to do the factory
Yeah.
reset.
Yeah.
So but obviously there are ways, even for the owner of the phone, as I said, to unlock it, send it to you, that kind of thing. Obviously, you accept iPhones, Android phones. They don't need they shouldn't have a phone plan attached to them. Anybody can dial 911 without a SIM card. That's very important to reiterate, to emphasize. All they need is the physical phone itself without the plan attached to it, and they can call for help when they need it.
Yeah.
Yeah. What other kind of donations do you need that are physical items, Mark?
That's it right now. That's it.
Okay.
I only have a small office, so I'm good with clothing. I'm good with hygiene, shampoo and soap and deodorant and pregnancy sticks.
Okay.
I'm good with, yeah. So, uh, there are individual, like I think I've got somebody I'm going to be tweeting about, someone that's looking for a specific size of clothing, that guy that I just gave $100 to.
Okay.
So I'm going to put his size out on Twitter, and somebody might have a jacket or pants that'll fit him.
Yeah.
But that, so it's always look at my timeline, and I'll
Yeah. And that'll show up on
know,
Mastodon and Threads and all that as well. So
yeah,
that's cool.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Awesome. So I'm not sure the full extent of what you wanted to dedicate an entire episode in terms of cell phones, but we can do that during at some point in
I
the.
don't think, I think just on donations, other than,
Okay.
yeah, I think they've just spread it about a bit.
Yeah.
Because talking an hour about cell phones, I think we'd be pretty
Well, you're
blank.
the one who suggested it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But yeah, because I think it's again important to emphasize that it's not just monetary donations. That money gets you a lot, but to have the physical phones or the Chromebooks or other physical items, of course, to contact you first, and I guess email or phone call or what have you. Hey, Mark, do you need this? I don't think you want 1,000 items just showing up at your office one day or 1 week. So maybe it's best to reach out, as we've said in the
Yeah.
past. Yeah.
Yeah. Because for every item donated, I've got to, there's a bit of infrastructure to get the item to the person.
Okay.
And if I get 1,000 items, then I'm out 1,000 times, and then I'm not doing the other stuff. Right now, because of the size of my office and it's just me, it's just very specific items right now that I can provide. And that's where donations are so important, because with e-transfers now, and you can pivot and you can move very quickly and provide that instant support, because most of the people that I work with do have bank accounts, because you need a bank account for your income support, and thus they can do e-transfers. Yeah.
Okay. I'm glad you mentioned e-transfers. I'll just say that. I'll mention that for a moment. All people have to do is send you the e-transfer to mark@coalitionforjhr.org. We'll put that in the show notes. It's on your website, on your social media. All people, they can just send the e-transfer the money. No secret answer needed. It's direct deposit. It's automatic. They could do it right now, right? Awesome.
Exactly.
Yes. Awesome. I think we'll leave it there for today, Mark. We'll talk again, I'm assuming in another month, but we shall see, depending on how your schedule pans out and what kind of emergencies come to your attention that you have to deal with. But I look forward to, and I know we all do, look forward to hearing more of what you have to say in episode 3. Thank you, Mark. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Yes.
Awesome. Thank you, Mark. Appreciate your time.
Okay, Kevin. Thanks again for doing all this. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Mark.
Okay. Okay.
See you, Mark. Bye.
Bye.
That'll do it for episode 2 of the Mark Cherrington podcast. I'm very grateful to Mark for taking the time to share with us important stories and about the successful fundraiser. He also spoke to the people he has helped in the past month, the systematic challenges they face, and the critical role of sustainable, ongoing donations. Our conversation emphasizes the importance of advocacy and the need for systematic reform to support vulnerable and marginalized people in our communities. You can view the show notes for this episode at kevinthetechguy.ca. Click on podcasts at the top and go to the main page for this podcast. If you have questions, comment, or feedback about these episodes, please email us at feedback@markcherrington.ca. That's feedback@markcherrington.ca. You can follow Mark over on Twitter at twitter.com/markcherrington, as well as on Threads, Mastodon, and Blue Sky. Just search for his name and you'll find him. You can reach out to me on those same social networks, me as well, over on most. You can check out my home business over at kevinthetechguy.ca. I offer blog posts to help you get the most out of your technology and paid subscription content, podcasts, a newsletter, and more. Patreon supporters get early access to my podcast and newsletter. I'll be making some important updates in the coming weeks, so stay tuned. Thank you so much for watching and listening.